Thank you for that. We now have alarming health news. The CDC warning a drug-resistant and potentially deadly fungus has been spreading rapidly through U.S. healthcare facilities. A new government study finding cases of the fungus, a type of yeast called Candida auris, jumping from 4 states in 2016 to 21 in 2021. For more on this growing health concern, I'm joined now by NBC News medical contributor, Dr. Kavita Patel. Dr. Patel, let's just get the big scary part in some ways out off of the top, because a lot of people have probably heard a lot about fungal infections simply because of the very popular HBO television show, The Last of Us. I know it's big in my household, but experts, they're saying don't panic. This is not quite like that. Explain to us what we're seeing in terms of these rising numbers in cases, and how worried should people really be?
Yeah, Allison, you're in my household too. So here's the good news. This is a fungus that is commonly found on skin. And for the majority of people, Allison, it does not cause a problem. Where it does cause problems are in people who are immunocompromised. That can generally be older people or people with chronic conditions. And what we know about this fungus is that it can attack it once it gets into your system. If you're immunocompromised, it can be incredibly resistant to the typical antifungal medications that we use, which makes it harder to diagnose and harder to treat. And especially because we're talking about usually hospital-acquired infections. These are infections that we see in hospital settings. So these are people who are already sick with other infections, Allison. And common symptoms that we look for, it can attack many of the organs that we have. It can attack the nervous system, the blood, the brain, kidneys. It can go anywhere. But the key here is to remember that this can be prevented with good hand hygiene, keeping hospitals, doing all the things that we had to do during COVID, but just remembering to double up on that as we look at how this spreads from hospital facilities, especially to patients who are elderly or immunocompromised.
So if you are someone who has a loved one in the hospital who falls into that category and you're thinking, oh my goodness, do I need to be wiping things down more? How is this transmitted? And what's your advice to people who are in that situation?
Yeah, it is commonly the transmission really is on surfaces. So again, we can find this. It's possible that many people in hospital settings or in nursing home settings have it on their skin. We see this with other fungus and bacterial infections, by the way, but they don't cause a problem until they can get into the body somehow. That can be a break through the skin. It can be through the respiratory system. So if you have a loved one, honestly, it's just making sure that you have good hand hygiene. I've done this with loved ones in nursing homes myself. I'll just try to make sure, hey, by the way, do you mind washing your hands? I know people are reluctant to do things like that, Allison, but it is just reminders like that. I think what the CDC is also doing by putting all healthcare workers on alert is to remind us that we should be thinking about these infections if we see unusual patterns in patients where they're not responding typically to the antibiotics or to the antifungals that we might prescribe. So with your loved ones, basic hand hygiene and just wearing a mask, not entering if you're sick, things like that can make a difference.
Dr. Kavita Patel, thank you so much. We had over